So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful evening today where we have the joy of hosting Uday, who is a very distinguished leader and who's really one of the best, examples of somebody who's working in perhaps the most crucial industry. The pandemic has brought the focus on health and on the pharma industry like never before. And, here we have Uday, an exceptional leader, working right there in perhaps the world's most competitive market, the United States, doing fascinating things with his organization. And just to see his journey evolve from an IIM Ahmedabad alumnus to the current role has been absolutely amazing. So, Uday, thank you for doing this for us. We are heading towards the end of this series. It's like the grand finale of this digital series. So we are so very pleased to host you. So with these words, may I request Neetika also to say something to welcome you, and then the students will take over, please.
Thank you, Anil. And once again, good evening, Uday, and my fellow mates here, my students. Welcome all of you to this nice time and space where we have a very interesting topic at hand to discuss about overcoming, the immunity to change. And Uday, I'm so glad that, to meet you over this platform. Incidentally, I'm doing a course on mergers and acquisitions right now as we are speaking, and we're talking about how, post-deal integration is a big challenge, the change management part of it. And you have gone through several of these, and you're currently also going through that. So it'll be great to listen to your practical ideas and insights on how our students can embrace change and equip themselves, not just in their personal lives, but also in their professional lives, and contribute better to the corporate recruiters wherever they're working. So thank you very much for joining us. And we really look forward to a very enriching discussion with you. May I think, start with inviting you, Uday, to take us through your life journey and how the leadership came about and what kind of challenges that came across your way, and how did you deal with them? So that would set probably the right context here. And then we can ask the students to share their insights from the sessions they've had with Anil on this entire topic.
Sure, I can do that. And I would want to do it in brief so that, if there are any additional questions, I can go into the details. So thank you once again, Anil and Nitika, for inviting me to this. And thank you, students. It's nice meeting you virtually. It's morning here, it's evening in India. As Anil briefly mentioned, so I completed my chemical engineering from IIT Delhi, and I did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. This was in 92 that I completed my MBA. And I joined a management consulting firm. At that time, it was known as Anderson Consulting. Now it's known as Accenture. I was there for about 2.5 years. I don't want to sort of create an impression on anyone, but I did get bored with management consulting. So I decided to switch over to the industry. That was a very personal choice. I worked with a small company for about a year and then joined Sun Pharmaceutical in 1995. Multiple roles, a very exciting journey. Sun Pharma was just about 100 crore organization back then. Just had gone public a year before I joined them. And I was with Sun Pharma for about 5 years in different roles, including head of IT. I left them. I joined a company called Lafarge. It's a world's largest cement manufacturer then. Now, of course, it's in a new avatar called Lafarge Holcim. It is again now the world's largest building materials company. I was with their India business for about 6 years. Again, very interesting roles. I joined them as head of IT, and I moved into head of purchasing. And some of you would wonder how come a head of IT becomes a head of purchasing, but that's where I ended up being, and an exhilarating journey. I can give the details if anyone is interested later. And then I decided to leave Lafarge Holcim and come back to Sun Pharma. So in 2005, I joined Sun Pharma again. Again, multiple roles. I joined as head of investor relations and media relations. Moved from there in 2012. I became the global CFO for Sun Pharma. In 2017, I became the CEO and a board member at Taro, where I'm here now. I'll be completing 5 years this August. This has been my journey. I would say each part of my journey has been amazing, huge learning, very different from whatever I had done in the past. So it included a lot of change, a lot of personal growth, professional growth for myself. And in hindsight, I can say that it looks like at least I have done justice to every role that I have played. But I'm not sure if I could have done better.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Uday. May I now invite our students to share the learnings that they have had in the class of self-leadership with our founder and chairman, Anil, who personally takes this course to help the students discover themselves and, strengthen themselves for a lifelong learning. And the interesting thing that we were discussing was how soil curriculum becomes so unique, and this is something that's not taught elsewhere, but is probably one of the most crucial things to your development. So I'll request Sneha Solanki to start and share her thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sneha Solanki, and I'm from Ratlam, Madhya Pradesh. Currently, I'm pursuing 1-year PGPM program from SOIL. First of all, I would like to thank Anil sir and Nitika ma'am for this opportunity. Coming to the topic, overcoming immunity to change. I would like to start this with a math problem. If 14 frogs sat on a log and 3 of them decided to jump into the water, how many frogs would be left on the log? Now, we all think 14 minus 3 equals to 11 should be the answer. But I want to suggest that 14 might be the better answer, because there is a big difference between deciding to and actually doing it. There is a mysterious kind of space between our actual intentions and what we are actually able to bring. We are in deep need of some new ways of thinking about what gets in the way between our genuine intentions and what we are actually able to bring about. People are not aware about the obstacles in their way, and we keep on giving excuses all the time. In this self-leadership course, I learned about this, how to overcome the challenges. Immunity map helps us to fill the mysterious space and overcome the challenges or obstacles that comes on the way, in which we first write our goals, which is something with a big payoff that we are motivated to achieve. Then what you do. This is where you list the behavior that prevents you from achieving your self-improvement of the goals. Then why you do it. You need to find out when you are not doing something you believe would benefit you. It's because you have competing commitments that you are holding you back. If I imagine myself trying to do the opposite of this, what is the most uncomfortable or worrisome feeling that comes up for me that I need to find out? Then assumptions, which are the ideas we hold to be true, even though until we challenge them. And lastly, we experiment with these assumptions. We start with a single assumption. We ask ourselves what assumption gets most in our way, which one, if changed or acted against, would make the biggest, most positive change in our life. And this way, they can alter the mindset itself that is producing the behavior. Once we follow this, the journey of immunity to change becomes easy. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sneha, for taking us through that 4-step process of the immunity map as defined by Robert Kagan in his book. immunity to change. And I think that's a wonderful tool for all of us to be able to tackle our concerns and the inhibitions that we have to change. May I now invite Shweta to share her learnings?
So good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Anil sir and Neetika ma'am for this opportunity. Like everyone, I also had different learning from each leadership class we had. And one topic which I could relate the most was immunity to change. So immunity to change has a positive purpose in our life. It is unique and it focuses exclusively on our mindset transformation. So change is always difficult. Change cannot be done overnight. It needs to be processed and we need to work on it regularly and accept it. So we are often resistant to change and we avoid and we say we'll not change. But without our knowing, we'll change according to the needs. So even if we resist or avoid, it will enter our lives. So when we initiate the change ourselves, it will become very easy. So from this course, the immunity to change is the existence of an internal conflict between our unconscious thoughts and desires and the need for the change. So for me personally, one place I could relate where I have the immunity change is during my work days. So I was overloaded with work, and the reason behind this was I would always say yes to the work they had given me, the leads had assigned to me, even when I know that I don't have the time to do it. And at one point, it was causing a lot of stress, and I had to start saying no for my own good. But it was not easy for me. The change was not very easy because I was not used to saying no. But I had to work on it gradually. And at one point, I was finally able to achieve the change for a good. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Shweta. I think that's a very practical example, and learning to say no and bringing a change in our personality, that way is not easy. I'm sure you would have gone through a journey to do that. Now may I invite Shobhit Jain to take us through his learnings and insights.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am, and good evening, everyone. So, in the immunity to change, our dear Anil sir has explained us that inside our own mind, where there is the strong commitment to change, there is equally powerful force that prevent us from changing. There is something which is opposing our decision to change. This could be our desire of getting pleasure or be in our comfort zone. So with me, if I try to change, one voice always come from my mind, asking the reason, why should I change? And during this process of change, various negative thoughts comes into my mind. So I found that the control of mind is the important thing in this. Also, two prominent researchers, Robert Keegan and Lisa Lesko, believe that they have cracked the code of overcome the immunity to change with the help of adaptive change, which requires a shift in mindset. And this sort of change requires self-inquiry and the self-exploration. And this could also be implemented in our corporate world too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shobhit, for highlighting that difference between a technical change and an adaptive change. Adaptive change is more related to your mindset, and it's a more, sustainable behavior that we talk about here. And it's not easy to bring that in, but I think that's the key to a long-lasting change that we want. All right, thank you. And may I now ask Shivani to share her thoughts.
Thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, I would like to welcome you, sir. It's an honor for me to welcome you to this discussion. And secondly, I would like to thank Anil, sir, for providing us an opportunity to be a part of a curriculum on self-leadership, wherein we have learned a lot of important aspects of our lives, which paves the way for being the best in our professional as well as personal journeys. Talking about immunity to change, I believe that it is not only about resisting change, but it is also about the conflicting thoughts that we have in our mind in order to know what is there required, what is the desire for the need to change, to implement that change. So we have all grown up listening to the fact that change is the only constant, and in order to drive any business outcome or any outcome for that matter, change is required. So I believe that if we just start, the most difficult task I believe that we think upon, we ponder, is that to begin from where to begin. And if we are comfortable and agile enough to start for the new beginnings, I feel that it would be much easier to implement the immunity to change and overcome the self-defeating behavior in order to bring that positive effect in our lives. So this is from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Shivani. very well said that, it is the starting or making a beginning, which is the toughest part. The journey automatically flows, but convincing ourselves to at least to make a start, that there is a need for a change and we need to start on that, is something very, very crucial. Thank you. And Sneha, Surendra, can we now hear you?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Good evening, sir. I mean, for me, I feel very privileged that I'm sharing the space with you. Firstly, because I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry, so I feel very lucky. Secondly, I would like to say that, in our self-leadership sessions, we are asked to create an immunity map. So we keep thinking about the changes that we would like to see. But once we get down with it and we come face to face with it, that's when the games really starts. And so that experience was very cathartic, because I realized that, the immunity map that I'm probably creating for myself, it keeps changing. I mean, you attain one milestone, then you would like to see some other change. So when we talk about these changes that we like to foresee at an individual level, I'm sure, with the changing market landscapes, corporates do that as well. They create an immunity map to foresee the changes that they like to execute. Something that you mentioned about change management with the recent acquisition also of Alchemist. So I wanted to know from your personal from your professional journey, what was your experience? How do corporates structure their immunity map, and how do they go about to see the changes that they wanted to execute? I mean, I took the privilege to end this with the questions. So yeah, thank you so much.
So, Nitika, how do you want me to?
Sure, Uday. I think Sneha has posed a very relevant question. Maybe we can start by your answering that.
Sure. So, first of all, I have to acknowledge very refreshing to hear such thoughts from all the 5 youngsters who are here. Clearly, I think what you are gaining as part of your curriculum, your education, your training is going to be extremely useful for you in life. And I while you were speaking, I was trying to make some notes based on what you were speaking. I think a couple of things I want to, and again, don't get me wrong. These are things that are coming from my not being necessarily an accomplished speaker on such forums. But I have to say that when we read in let's say theory, and when we look at academics, I think it's important for us to transition successfully from academics to professional life as well. Everything that we learn, because I'm a strong believer that most of it that is there in academics has a root, some kind of a basis in professional life, and both sort of coexist. I've gone through, next year I'll be completing my 30 years of professional life. Honestly, I'm hearing the phrase immunity map for the first time. I think I have handled this, and I'm sure everyone who worked with me, my team, my peers, everyone has handled this journey. Everyone has sort of found a way around, solved issues, and sort of made change happen. But I'm not sure if anyone has called it an immunity map, not when I was in the room at least. But I have to say that I think as an organization, there are different, and organizations are at different stages of evolution, different stages of maturity, and everyone sort of does things on their own depending on the specific context. If I was to sort of rewind, and one of the most, and each part of my career has been very exciting, as I mentioned. But I think some of the things that they really stand in your mind, you remember them years and years, decades after those have happened. I have to go back to my story of purchasing as head of purchasing in Lafarge in 2003. When I stepped into that role, I had never done that role in my life. I was inheriting a team that was probably on an average had 10 years more experience than me, or maybe 15 years more experience, professional experience than me. So procurement was new for me. I was inheriting a team that was far more experienced than what I was. Our then head of procurement was at his age of retirement, so he was retiring, and I was brought in. And not to sort of belittle or talk negative, but really the procurement team within Lafarge at that point in time was sort of considered a team that's also there. Meaning they're also there. That's okay. If we need something to be done by them, we will get it done, but that's okay. And when I came in, we looked at it. What the team should be doing, what should be our, I would say, strategic contribution to the organization, and what has been the case, and what are we doing. And we embarked on a change program within. And obviously, I think from a immunity map perspective, we really define what is it that we want to achieve. What is it that, why are we not able to achieve? Let's say, what have we not done in the past that is preventing us from achieve? And do we have the capabilities within the team? Do we have the support of the organization? Do we have a game plan so that we can convince the rest of the organization that yes, we can make this change happen, and make this change happen successfully? And believe me, the same team, I did not add a single person to the team. The same team, what they did till, let's say, April of 2003, and what they did after April of 2003 was dramatically different, completely different. I don't think the team can itself recognize when they look back as to what they achieved, just because they were sort of motivated and driven very differently from that point in time onwards. Just to give you a sample, we organized ourselves as strategic purchasing segments. So, there was a team. The way it used to happen is, and this is cement industry, so what gets consumed in the cement industry. We buy coal, we buy gypsum, we buy limestone. Limestone is mined, but then it's possible for us to shift across plants, and also we need to go for new limestone mines. Now, we would also buy equipment, machinery. We would buy a lot of other raw materials. Cement is sold in bags, so we had to buy bags. So each plant was doing its own purchasing. So we said, no, we will go ahead with, we will do away with this. We want specialized. Someone who buys bags will focus on buying bags for the entire organization, so that we don't duplicate resources, we don't lose best practices. Someone who buys coal will buy coal for the entire company. Someone who buys equipment will buy equipment for the entire company. And we organize ourselves as, I would say, strategic groups, strategic procurement groups, so that we develop capability and we develop resources based on whatever is required for that particular segment. If you really look at the industry, that's the way most procurement or strategic procurement groups are organized. But that wasn't the case back then for Lafarge. And I was not coming from having 20 years of procurement experience. I was sort of very new in the procurement function, but it was very logical that this is the way. And when we discussed this as a group, the group really felt energized that yes, this makes sense. This is the way for us to do it. Another thing is that we were using disjointed information systems. We were using processes that were still focused on, let's say, just a plant. Whatever that plant had to do, they would do. So we said, no, we cannot work this way. If I'm organizing myself as a strategic procurement team, I need to necessarily have processes that support that. So we reorganized the entire, or I would say, I call it re-engineering. We re-engineered the entire business process for procurement, starting from requisition to sort of payment to the supplier, that whole thing, procure to pay. And we also implemented a new IT system. At that point in time, JD Edwards was sort of the state of the art. So we moved away from whatever we had and we implemented JD Edwards. And all of this was accomplished in a span of about 7 to 8 months, start to finish. And believe me, the level of energy that the team had, and I have to sort of give full credit to the team, what they were able to do. In fact, we would have a review every month, and some people don't believe me still when I say we would start our meeting at 8 in the morning on day 1, and they would go on till 2 in the morning the next day, unbroken. We would just, and this would get repeated month after month, and the team would themselves say that, we feel so charged up and so energized to bring this change about, so get this done for the organization, that we are not feeling tired at all. And we would have this typically a 2 or a 3 day meeting of all the action plans that we have, what are we doing. And Mind you, while we are doing this change, we had an organization to service. We still had to buy what we were buying. We still had to negotiate what we are doing. All of that was to be done. So the team had almost stepped up, doing probably 150% of what they were doing in the past. And we were accomplishing this. I think the most exhilarating part of my journey has been those, 12 to 15 months that we spent on making the change happen and then stabilizing. And I have to say, when I look back, I would say this is more an individual pride for me. As I said, I did not hire any new person in the team. It's the same team that delivered for me. And everyone who was at the right age at that point in time, every single person of that has gone on to head procurement functions in other organizations, some local, some global organizations since then. And that to me is the essence of, I would say, the leadership, where each individual, whatever they were doing good. But henceforth, after that experience, I think they themselves realize that their potential is probably much beyond what they have done till date. And each one of them, and I don't want to embarrass anyone by taking names, but each one of them is a big leader in their own right now and heading organizations which are hundreds or thousands of crores, buying materials, buying goods, probably millions of dollars. Some people have gone on to global roles in large organizations. And while I have not necessarily addressed, Neha, your question on the map, but this is one experience that sort of I always relate back that we made that change happen. We did good for the organization, but we also did good for the team members, and the entire organization recognized. We would hear that purchasing was sort of way back in the line somewhere, and now you guys are sort of standing next to us, shoulder to shoulder, and helping the organization execute on strategy. And the whole team, the whole organization, everyone sort of witnessed that transformation in happening.
Very, very interesting there. I mean, so if we were to, just think about it a little bit more deeply, what exactly you think happened there, and what did you trigger that brought about that change in mindset of people? So earlier they were quite used to being that sleepy old side service, and you suddenly, triggered something in them that, just charged them up to work harder or think differently and, come to the forefront. So what would you say was the key thing there?
Difficult for and I'm not an academic, so difficult for me to sort of really pinpoint, but a few things happened. I would say that when I came in, I was a novice in procurement. I have to admit, the only procurement that I had done was about probably annually 5 crores of procurement for IT, because IT used to buy on its own. So I wasn't a part of the central procurement. So that was my only procurement background. So I came in and I tried to understand what was happening and challenge what was happening and why it was happening. And when I started to ask those questions and sort of also challenge the team that I think we can do better on this. Why don't you guys think of newer ideas or newer ways of doing it? And have you thought of doing it differently in the past? And that trigger almost create an outpouring of ideas. And knowing that what we did was we also went to the users. I remember I anchored a brainstorming session at each of the manufacturing sites, gathered probably 30, 35 people in the room. And I was standing on the board with a couple of my procurement guys sitting down and taking notes. I asked all the users, guys, throw ideas. What can we do better as a procurement team, which will help you and help the organization? And it could be anything. It could be simple as saying that, I think you guys are too slow. Say that, doesn't matter. And I think we can buy these bearings in a much more efficient way if you were to do it differently. A whole range of ideas. So we captured everything. And as in brainstorming, you don't evaluate. You first capture. Evaluation is the next stage. So we just captured all the ideas, we put them on the board. I don't remember the count, but I think after doing the session at all the three manufacturing sites, we probably gathered close to 200 plus ideas as to what we can do. And when my team saw that, we have a whole wealth of ideas that we can work on, I think that really got them very energized. They themselves have contributed some, but users had contributed. And I think the best part was we did not get into an evaluation. No, we did well. I don't think you got it right. We didn't do any evaluation. Let it come, let it flow. We gathered, we sort of coalesced the ideas into a few key themes. And every person of my team sort of took upon himself and herself to drive that change, saying that, okay, we will make this happen. So, we group them into process ideas. We group them into, let's say, raw material procurement ideas. We group them into system ideas. We group them into just the interface. We don't get to know what's happening in your team till the final order is placed. Or no one helps us chase with the supplier when the material is coming on time. So there were a lot of those things. We grouped those ideas. We made every person, and I think the team was very willing to go beyond what they had done. And they saw that, there are opportunities for us to do. So that really, I would say, charged them up. And we had action plans defined. And as I said, we did a very periodic review. So the fact that we had a team that was open to challenge, that was open to looking at new things, I think that was a big advantage for me personally.
It's very nice. Something similar to the LSIP process that we do here. We call that large-scale interactive processes, where we get people to pool in their ideas, and then we do an affinity process, of collecting those like ideas. But ultimately, I think, yes, it is about respecting human beings.
I have a question to Uday.
Yes, Anil.
Hey, this whole work on immunity to change, which was spearheaded by the Harvard professors, Professor Keegan and his colleague, their whole research showed that even though people and organizations want to change in a particular direction, there is something within their own existing ways of thinking which prevents them to change. He says there is something called a hidden competing commitment. It's also like the work of the innovator's dilemma, that whole work done by, Christensen, Professor Clayton Christensen, which also talked about the same thing, that when organizations are too invested in a certain way of doing things, they find it very difficult to change towards new directions. So I'm just curious to know whether you have found this competing commitments. On one hand, people want to change. On the other hand, actually deep within their own subconscious, there is something which is preventing them to change and which is actually opposed to the direction to change. And then there are these very interesting ways on how to overcome that. So I'm curious to know, Uday, in your own experience, if you have seen this, and if so, what have you done to sort of help people to overcome this immunity to change?
And this is very true. I think this is also almost a daily experience over my 30 years that I have lived with, including probably, I am myself exhibiting some of that as well, consciously, subconsciously. I think one of the things that I have found is people, they feel a bit exposed, they feel a bit uncertain, particularly if it is relating to what they have done over the years. So there is a need for them to defend what they have done over the years. And the moment there is a challenge to that, for me to admit that I did not do it in the best possible way, or there was a better way for me to do it, is not an easy admission on part of anyone. And as I said, probably, I may have exhibited that or maybe exhibiting that behavior as well. I think helping people admit that there is always probably a better way for us to do things is very important. And whether it is in terms of giving them a face saving, helping them realize that there is not necessarily a downside in admission, that there was a better way for us to do things. We may have overlooked it. I think some of those things, the individual interaction, the individual connect that we have often makes a lot of difference. And in my other roles in the past, I have seen, while there is a large group of people who is willing to go that extra mile and make things happen, there are a few holdouts who would sort of say that, oh, I have tried, but it hasn't worked. Oh, this is the only way that it can work. And then you have to necessarily help those people understand. And one may have to get into far more detail with them, saying that, okay, how did you do it? What options did you evaluate? What was the criteria on which you evaluated those options? Whether those criteria they may have been right at that point in time, but today maybe the organization is looking at a very different criteria. I mean, just as a simple thing, I evaluated something based on cost in the past, and I came to a conclusion that this is the best option for me. Today, if service is more important for me, cost is important, but service is more important, then I have to look at whether the trade-off between the time that one option takes and the other option takes, whether it is worthwhile for me to switch, saying that even at a 10% higher cost, if I can reduce my time to market by, let's say, 60%, it would probably make far more sense. So it's not saying what you did was wrong, but in the changed circumstances, I think we need to now look at things differently. So I think there are people and teams that hold out for one or the other, as you say, there is a competing commitment. It's either being defensive of themselves or what they have done in the past, or just that they haven't looked at it, or they just don't want to. Sometimes what happens is that you're at a stage in life where you don't want to go that extra 25%. You don't want to, because you're happy, you're contented, you're making a good living, you have a good family life, good social life. What's in it for me if I do that extra 25%? Why would I do that? So you have to help people understand that, it's for the organization, it's for your own learning. In my life, I have sort of grown all these years because every single opportunity that I got, I put in that extra. I think that was necessary. And I would say, supported by a team at all stages in my life, including now, where the teams are willing to go that extra over the 100%. And one has to sort of convince them that this is the right thing for them to do. So multiple things.
We have a few questions from the audience also, if we can take that now, Anil. Yeah. So, Ravi is asking what you would have done differently if there was a lot of resistance from team members to change their mindset. I think he's asking on the previous event that you described during the purchasing officer days.
Sure. Yes. I think it was by my evaluation, it was a very successful change, but it wasn't everything good. I have to admit. I think we made mistakes. I made mistakes. My team made mistakes, and while my team was, I would say, 100% on board in making those changes happen, I think some parts of the organization who were losing their ability to decide on purchasing matters wasn't as happy, and that's sort of easy for us to understand as human beings, that when we lose our authority or power, it's not necessarily a very comfortable situation for us to be in. And those parts of the organization did resist overtly, covertly. They did find a way of pointing out flaws. And I have to admit that probably we went overboard as a procurement team, and I take full responsibility for that. We went overboard. In hindsight, if I would have had to do things differently, I would have very clearly kept a few items to be bought locally. And that's a mistake that we made. We over-centralized. And when we over-centralized, small decisions started going to, let's say, a central procurement team. And when they are not based at the site, it just takes more time to communicate with them. And it also, they don't necessarily have the same sensitivity of urgency that a site has. And that sense of urgency doesn't necessarily travel through documents. So in hindsight, I would have done things differently. I would have kept probably a few more local decisions and things like, I need something from the market in the city. I need, let's say, a local service provider for me to do some things. Those kinds of decisions. While we had kept a few, but probably we would have kept a few more to ensure that the sites don't suffer just because we are centralizing for the benefit of the larger organization. I think that's clearly one learning that we had out of that entire exercise.
Shweta Ramesh also has a question here. Shweta, you want to go next?
So, sir, I'm an HR student, and currently we are studying a course on gender and inclusion. So, in that, we have read cases where, usually people don't accept women in the senior management team. So, in one of your recent LinkedIn posts, you have mentioned like your organization constitutes 43% of the senior management and 48% of women in the entire workforce. So, how did you bring this change in the organization, and how challenging it was to change the mindset of the people?
So, I can first talk personally. For right or wrong reasons, for me, the evaluation has never been about gender. It just doesn't come to my mind. Why it hasn't come, I haven't been able to go back into my own life and dig up as to, since when did this start? But it just doesn't happen. So when I get, let's say, a profile or a resume, while I look at it, who's the candidate, but it has never occurred to me that, it's a woman candidate or it's a man, and hence, I need to look at it differently. It has never happened to me. In fact, more and more I think about it, I need to dig deeper into my own past and history as to, when did my thinking become so neutral that I am sort of, okay, it doesn't matter who the person is. As far as coming to the organization, I have to say that, everything was not done by me. I inherited an organization in 2017, which already had women leaders. So it's not as if, I have accomplished all of this in the last 4.5 years. My head of HR, my head of quality, my head of commercial in Canada, all women. And over the years, I've only added to that. So when my CFO resigned, we hired a CFO who was a woman. She has left us now, but she was here for a short time. We have head of compliance who's now a woman. So I think we've, as I said, I've never considered that as a criteria at all. If someone is capable and willing to work with us, everyone is welcome. When I go down into the organization, and I don't know how well you know our organization, we have 3 parts. We have a big site in Israel where we have 700 employees. We have a site in Canada where we have 500 plus employees. And then, of course, we have US where we have a corporate office and a few main functions. When I look at Israel, Israel has always had a very, very high proportion of women. In fact, there are teams where we have probably 65% women and 35%. And these are technical functions. I'm not talking of the typical, what happens with women is the softer functions get associated with them. It is HR, or it is probably finance, or some of these others. I'm talking of core technical functions. In fact, when I look at my next level in Israel, there are a large number of women in technical roles. So I think that's just the nature of the organization. I have to commend, my previous CEOs and all my leadership team, that they've probably also never looked at gender playing a critical role in the decision of hiring a person or promoting a person. We promoted a lot of women through the organization over the years. And I think it was just based on their capability and their contribution, and what works for the organization and for them is these decisions have been made. And hence today we are at a stage where, the statistic that you quoted, we have that proportion of women. So I would say, I can only say that I have perpetuated, I think, the great sense of accepting a candidate, a good candidate, and not looking at it from a gender perspective, That thinking was already there in the organization, and I have sort of tried to perpetuate that, and here we are.
We also have a question from Sandeep Ghosal here. He says, when you let so many VOCs or ideas to flow, how do you differentiate suggestions between the ones that are CTP and CTQ? And how can we drill down to key ideas?
What is CTP and CTQ?
Yes, I was also going to ask that. I'm not sure what differentiate suggestions between the ones. I'm not sure. Sandeep, if you can please explain that if you're in the audience, if you can type out and explain that. Until you do that, maybe we can take one more question from Rakesh Chinsi.
It says critical to process, critical to quality.
Okay, he's mentioned that critical to process.
So, and you're probably referring to the brainstorming sessions that I talked of earlier. I think, what, as I said, what we did was we took all the ideas, everything that came to us. We did not reject a single idea at that stage. We took all the ideas and then we classified them into a few key themes. And then the team did some evaluation of that. What's the, I would say, multiple evaluations, ease to implement that change, the impact of that change, and the cost to make that change happen. I think these 3 or 4 criteria were used. And we segregated ideas that we would like to do, let's say, year 1, idea that we would like to do year 2, idea that we would like to do year 3. And of that, some came out saying that, these ideas are probably more wish lists of users, but these go against the grain of what we want to do. It doesn't fit with the longer term strategy of the organization. You would not want to do it. And those were sort of dropped. So we looked at all of this, and as part of this evaluation, obviously every department was involved there. So if it was, let's say, something related to process, if it was impacting finance and impacting, let's say, the production team, then they would be kept in the loop. If there was something which would have impacted, someone says, okay, can we buy cheaper coal, or can we buy gypsum from a different source? Or can we look at, instead of buying this gypsum, can we look at buying, instead of natural gypsum, which was more expensive, can we buy artificial gypsum? And then one would look at what impact will it have on quality? Can I do a blending there? If I was blending at a certain percentage, can I change the blend, and what impact it has on quality? So we went through all those evaluations and then finally decided as to what was the most appropriate. So when we implemented these ideas had a very broad acceptance and almost sign-offs from all the relevant teams that would have gotten impacted. I think that's a process that we follow.
Thank you. We'll probably take one question from Mr. Rakesh Jinsi. He says, it seems to have been a large and intense exercise. What were the quantifiable achievements? Example, improvement in profitability, cost savings, inventory reduction, manpower, time cycle. So were there any quantifiable achievements, or
there were. In fact, just to share, at the Lafarge Group, and Lafarge at that time was a Paris headquartered global company. In the Lafarge Group, there used to be a program run called Purchasing Actions, where each business unit had to sort of define what actions would it take to improve the overall performance of, let's say, the purchasing. And that was more focused on cost savings and things like that. And a lot of our actions actually got included in the purchasing actions for the India business unit. So we were tracking those for specific deliverables in terms of either cost improvement or time reduction. Just as an anecdote, when I shared, the kind of thing that we were able to do in centralizing the procurement and implementing a new system at regional or global forums within Lafarge, the purchasing forum that we used to have, there used to be almost a stunned silence in the room. And then someone would raise a hand and ask that, how did you convince your CEO to do this? Because we've been trying to do this for the last decade, and we haven't been able to convince the CEO to do this. So can you share your learnings? Because then this becomes an important template for us to follow. So I think there were quantifiable savings that we reported through the group. And I think even the process, a lot of people were involved. But just to sort of, there are large number of actions that we had planned and large amount of saving that we had done. I'll just give you one example, which is again, almost a standout example. As I said, cement in India is packed in bags. These are PP bags, polypropylene bags, 50 kg polypropylene bags. And before I forget, this used to be my favorite statement with all the suppliers that I used to meet, saying that, sir, we need a price increase, we need this. I said, guys, hold on. Cement is the cheapest commodity that you can get on the market. They said, no, we don't agree. I said, tell me one thing that you can buy for 3 rupees a kilo. What can you buy for 3 rupees a kilo? And I'm talking of prices then. I said, even water is selling 10 rupees a bottle. So what can you buy for 3 rupees a kilo? And they would say, I don't think anything. I said, cement I'm selling at 3 rupees a kilo. A 50 kilo bag I used to sell at 150 rupees. So I said, have mercy on cement manufacturers like us. You talk of price increase, but I cannot have even covering my basic cost. So, that's something that you need to keep in mind. In that scenario, we used to buy polypropylene bags. I'm talking of 2003, worth 40 crores annually. And that was sort of one of the largest spend items for us. And I said, polypropylene bags, and there were a dime a dozen manufacturers, some good quality, some not so good quality, but there are a large number of manufacturers. So we said, we need to do something different here. And what will we do? We will go for a reverse auction. So in 2003, we did the first reverse auction of polypropylene bags for Lafarge. I don't know how many of you are familiar with reverse auction. Reverse auction, basically you put your commodity and the suppliers are expected to bid, but reducing bids. It's a reverse auction. It's not in auction. Typically you raise the price. This is a reverse auction where you reduce the price. So someone says, I'll sell it to you at 100. The next supplier says, I can sell it to you at 98. And the next supplier says, I'll sell it to you at 96. And the bid keeps going down till it exhausts, and whoever wins, they get the contract. So we had 6 types of bags. We put all those bags on a reverse auction. And it was a fantastic process that we went through. Very transparent, very sealed, meaning there was nothing left loose. The only variable that people had was price, nothing else. Everything was already signed and sealed and agreed with all the suppliers who were part of the panel. We did an extensive evaluation of suppliers. There were about 3 suppliers that were supplying to us, and they had been supplying for ages. So they assumed that they will be part of this. We said, you will be there, but there will be others. So we went around, we evaluated multiple people. We had our strict criteria. We included them on the panel. We got all of them to our office, put them in different rooms on a weekend, because weekend the offices were empty. We said, all of you will sit in different rooms. We will provide you the computers and you will need to bid from here. You cannot bid from anywhere else. You have to bid from our office. We ran that whole process. We saved, the first time that we did it, we saved 18%. 18% saving. Now, meaning it was mind-boggling for everyone that how is it that we could save 18% on cost just by this, one action. Typically, when you hear of cost savings, I reduced 2%, 5%, 6% in procurement costs. We reduced prices by 18%. So that was almost a 6.7 or 7 crores worth of saving, or whatever, 7.5 crores worth of saving that we did on a 40 crore. And that
change
really
management process where they were trying to increase the prices.
And shook the whole organization to the core. That what did these guys do? And believe me, we continue to get the same quality of supply. We continue to get the same service from all our suppliers. Of course, we changed suppliers because the existing suppliers just everyone could not qualify. In fact, I remember one of the suppliers, they had been there for years. They said, oh, you've done this, now we will come and negotiate. I said, there is nothing, there is no negotiation. Everything is done. It's signed and sealed now. I have already given the contracts out. You can do nothing. So that is the magnitude of saving, just in response to that question.
I think we have two questions. In the interest of time, I think we'll just take them very quickly. One is from Balaji. He's a student at SOIL. And he says, when our initial efforts fail to produce fine improvements, we push harder and in turn, system pushes back even harder. In such cases, how to handle and channelize the resistance? I think it's kind of related to the other question where you talked about, somebody asked if there was resistance, then how would you have handled that? So maybe if you want to add anything to that, that's fine.
And going back to the classical Indian phrase of Sam Dam Dand Bhed, you have to try everything. I think if we continue to do the same thing, we will get the same result. And I have to admit that, it's not necessarily that you succeeded the first time. You have to try again. You have to try probably a different tack. It's possible that someone has not understood, has not bought in, or is fearful of their job, or is fearful of anything happening. If the past is uncovered, then they will be probably not looked at as favorably. So I think one has to look at all of that. And if someone is just unwilling to make a change, then you have to make a decision on that person. It's necessary. So I think you have to go the whole hog. You have to try everything. Most of the time, I would say 99% or probably almost 100%, I would say people accept the change. May not be the first time, maybe the second time, maybe the third time. One has to have a heart-to-heart conversation. One has to show the bigger picture. One has to show the benefit and sort of ask them, what is it that is really preventing you from making this happen? If I can help you anything. And most of the time people come out and we are able to help them. So I think, I've not faced that issue. You have to be at it. Perseverance has to be there. You have to look at things in a novel way and find ways of sort of still driving that change.
Yeah. Uday, I am currently also teaching a course on consulting skills to my students, and we are making them simulate. One group of students are behaving like the Ukraine leadership. The other group is behaving like Russian leadership. Another group is behaving like peace negotiators. And it's fascinating to see that if you do the role reversal, that all of a sudden now Ukraine has to perform the role of the Russians in the negotiation. The whole conversation begins to change. So, we are going to have this fascinating. And, thank you, Uday, for saying this. I just want to say one other thing about Keegan's work. When people and organizations realize that there are some hidden competing commitments that are coming in the way, which are based on certain mental models and assumptions, which is part of their past conditioning. And when they begin to challenge those mental models, then they begin to do new experiments. Then they say, oh my God, I never thought about it from that perspective. So I have a feeling that if some of our people some of our students were actually in the room there, where the negotiations are going on, they would learn a lot, and they would also ask some very interesting questions. That the only way to overcome immunity to change is to observe your own mind. It is what in the Indian philosophical conversation we are told, when you have Sakshi Bhav, when you can observe the functioning of your own mind, you can transform the mind. So I just wanted to say that, and maybe now it's getting to the end of our conversation. So over to you, Nitika, to round up. But thanks, Uday, for doing this for us.
I would just add one thing. Most of the time what happens is people are very fearful about what will happen to their job. And I'm not a political person, so I don't want this to be taken in a wrong way. But there is always a story circulating about Imran Khan when he was a captain of the team. The first thing that he would tell a newcomer is that you are in for the next series also, or for the next match also. So the newcomer has no pressure to perform. And that is the way he used to get the best out of people. And at some point in time with our teams, we need to reassure them that nothing is happening to you, man. Just help me change. Help us drive better performance for the organization. And that really brings out the best in people.
Yes, I think that's very well said, Uday. I totally agree. It's first removing the fear from the minds of people that really helps. Even when we do our courses, the first thing we try to do is remove the fear of learning from the minds of students, and we just encourage them to experiment and play around with all the learning, all the activities, and discover themselves through that. I think fear is the biggest factor. So it was so nice to interact and listen to you there. I mean, it's simply a pleasure to know from you, a humble leader like you, very grounded approach that you had. And I can totally understand how you would have managed to convince the teams to toe your line of thinking, because the way you get people around, you involve them, you understand them, you try and talk to them and really understand to the core what is it that prevents, and try to remove that bottleneck from their hearts. Because when a leader works in a very fair and objective manner, works for a win-win situation like you try to create, and acts out of the heart without any biases for the other person, I'm sure, I mean, it leads to everybody contributing and working together for a common cause. And that is what truly brings about a very positive change, which can work wonders for the company. And of course, the cause that you are working on. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to understand firsthand from you how this is done. And our students, I'm sure, have learned a lot. To connect, like you said, the academics to the practical world. And that's the whole idea of doing this series, that what we learn in classes, we're able to relate that to practical experiences of senior leaders like you. So thank you very, very much once again. We really appreciate the time that you've taken and shared your insights with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I really feel honored. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much,
Bye.
sir.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.